I have to tell you, I am excited to be here. And while it's my first keynote with you, you might be surprised. IBM's been involved with NRF. It's been over 40 years. 40 years. So now, right? Oh, that must be my IBMers clapping, okay? 40 years. But today, what do I want to talk about? Because there are some great things happening. Call it possibilities at the intersection of our two industries. Mine, yours. And I'm going to describe 3 technology trends to you. They are transforming my industry, but I want to convince you that this isn't about technology. This is all about business paradigms that are going to change for you. And so while I'm going to briefly talk about each, I am going to focus on what they mean from a business perspective. So I'm going to talk about big data. I saw that in the trailer. But I want to convince you that information is going to be the basis of competition for your entire industry, and no matter what you do. I'm going to briefly touch on cloud, but I want to convince you it's not about the technology. You are making business model choices. And then third, really quick, there is a radical new era of technology, something called cognitive. That means systems that learn. I assert this will radically change your industry. It will allow you to build relationships in a way that build trust that you never have before. So let me start with the first, and I may have a little bit of fun with some of these. I can sort of see half the room, not the whole room. I said I'm going to start with big data. Let me ask you, how many of you know what it is? This is part of your exercise program. Up, okay. Keep your hands. How many of you know what value it's going to really drive for you? Okay, I could feel the motion of down, okay? Some up, some down. Look, big data is a hot buzzword. I am in an industry that often is overhyped around buzzwords. But this is one that I feel is actually underhyped. And again, in the trailer, Terry mentioned this. I really believe this idea that information is going to be our world's, our generation's next natural resource. So I want you to think about it like steam was to the 18th century, electricity to the 19th, hydrocarbons to the 20th. And let me explain why really quick. You know, what's different right now is there's a number of technology shifts, and their convergence is happening at once. That's what makes it different right now. It's all at once. If you had one, it would typically spark a new era, but we have multiples. So you have pervasive instrumentation, 1 trillion objects, right? I was just counting my steps on my wrist here a second ago. Mobile, everywhere. In fact, you saw a chart earlier that said, note, more people have a cell phone than have running water. Social. 1/4 of the world's population will be on a social network, and 20% or more of your budget will be on social in the next 5 years out of marketing. As a result, that's what's created all of this big data. And a little tidbit for you, big data, 2.5 billion gigabytes per day are created, 2.5 billion. And it comes from 2 different sources. Or first, to give you kind of a perspective on that size, 80% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years. 80% of all the world's data in the last 2 years. It comes from structured, things that fit in rows and columns, and then what the world calls unstructured. Pictures, videos, tweets, blogs, location data, you name it. And this is where I want to come to what this means with retail, because that's my fast overview of the technology. And this is where, if I was with a retailer, but I must tell you how many leaders of other industries begin to feel the same, that information will be your basis of competitive advantage. So let me pick 3 dimensions that I think this is going to come to life for you. The first is easy. I hear you talk about it, you would guess. It will be how you engage with your clients, how you engage with your customers. Technology moves, as they say, from the back office to the front, from efficiency to engagement. You can look any part of this world, and I know this is a very international audience. You could look at a department store in Beijing, Weifuding, and you will find a company that already does a department store advanced analytics. They know one thing I buy, they use the analytics to put together a whole outfit. Or go forward, go further. Look at Kohl's. Now, many of you have worked on customer intelligence engines, things that understand the individual, the family, what they purchased, what they like, they don't, returns, you name it. But now go further, as some of you have done. Kohl's, in fact, is doing this in 5 different stores now. You walk in with your mobile phone, you're given the chance to opt in, so your movement is tracked, and then precisely an offer can come based on where you're at. So let's say I linger in the shoe department. I get a coupon, and it's based for shoes I looked at online, never bought. Our research, like others, show that you're much more likely to respond to an offer when it's at moment of purchase, and in fact, almost 70% of you want information or a coupon as you shop. So, like I said, this is the easy one, but before I leave it, just a comment, because how many of you have both a physical and an online presence? Online, offline, stores? Okay, so almost everybody here. So if I might, just a bit of comfort. People often talk about e-commerce surging. My view, very strongly, we're going to enter a period where, take great comfort, the stores will be a great, great source of data. They're a valuable source. And you're going to see the emergence of something come out that is something I think going to be very different. It'll be the intelligence of online combined with that tactile immediacy of being in a store. And so just kind of mark it in your mind, this idea of digital personas, digital guardians yet to come, that I think will actually add a whole new dimension and value to a store that's out there. Okay, so big data, first place, engaging customers, everybody would agree. Let me challenge you on the second one, because I think you're going to tell me you do it already, and I'm going to tell you not like this. The second area I see this impact of big data to change your business is your supply chain. And like I said, everybody who says, oh, we've been doing that forever, for decades, okay, I think the classic example is Walmart. Walmart then and Walmart now. Anyone who knows Walmart, everyone here has studied it. Sam Walton was a big believer in data. However, back in the 1990s, and many of you participate with this, Retail Link came out. It was revolutionary for its time. Access to data, daily point of sale, inventory, in fact, widely used, and it used what the world called structured data, rows and columns. Retail Link 2.0, rolling out now, is all about unstructured data, external, social, advanced analytics that are there to predict 600 terabytes of data. And now it's about prediction, scale, real time, and precision. 2 very different worlds. So before you sort of think, oh, I never have to come back to that, we've done all that on supply chain, I challenge you, this will be a huge basis of competitive advantage. Now, we did some work, a little bit of data, I always say. I always ask my team, show me the data on this, to show how valuable this is. So we looked at all our Smarter Planet references in the world, and I would like to share with you 2 behaviors of the best performers in the world out there. 2 behaviors that are common. First, and just sort of ask yourself in the company you run or you're part of. First, they use multiple sources of data. Structured, sales, operations, unstructured, mobile, instrumentation, you name it, social. Second thing, and this is, I think, the hardest thing, but it makes all the difference. They use a range of analytics, because another buzzword, analytics. They start with descriptive, they then do predictive, and then do prescriptive. Now, let me give you my layman's definition of what the difference is between those, and then sort of check yourself on how you use it in your own company. Pretend you have a GPS. You see point A and you see point B on a map. That's descriptive. Now, the next thing I do for you is I give you directions and the estimate of the time, the best route. That would be predictive. I'm predicting the time, I'm giving you a route. Next, while you're driving, I'm rerouting you based on traffic. That is prescriptive, happening right then and there. So just think about your ability, and is that how you use information? Because I will challenge you that the results we found are pretty striking. Just remember 2x. Those who used information that way, 2.5 times more likely to offer a new service, 2 times more likely to act real time on data, and 2 times more likely to personalize an offering for their customers. And the retailers in specific, we could actually see increased basket size, we could see increased conversion, and increased promotion response. So far, I've got to convince you, it's about your back office and your supply chain. It's about this taking to the edge how you engage consumers. But I also want to convince you that it's going to apply to just about everything you do in your company. So I'm going to assert you'll also build a better workforce. And you're going to see this combination of analytics and behavioral science come alive. So let me ask you a question. How many people in here hire people? I don't mean like right now, so it's not an economic survey, okay? So, all right, how many of you think that there's an art to interviewing that matters? I see a lot. Me too. I mean, we train, we 400,000 people, we train on hiring all the time, the way to hire, the good fit. Research shows judgment alone on good fit, you'll be right 50% of the time. So, some of you might have watched the Golden Globes last night. AMC, one of the movie theaters. Let me talk to you a second about some work we did on their concession counter employees. Stereotype. Who do you think is behind that counter when you come buy your popcorn? All right? You're going to guess it's probably, I'm going to guess for you since I can't hear you from here. It's probably a high school kid, college kid, right? Probably big turnover. So did work on the analytics of just who are those people behind the counter? Who are the best ones? They're socially sophisticated, take big initiative, high integrity. Now, you think, why am I telling you this story? I mean, any of you that, obviously, you're thinking, I know why. It's where they make all their money, is the concession counter, right? We combined advanced analytics, behavioral science, new assessment, how they got their employees, and the results are pretty startling. Top performing managers, a 6-figure increase in revenue, turnover down almost 50%, and best place to work. Applications are 1.2 million versus about a quarter of that 4 years ago, and highest profit in the industry. So, I mean, you're going to take this thought, and I must say I have to tell you one other tidbit I think you're going to find funny that I saw out of this hiring research. I can't help but share with you. I'm going to ask you a question, all on data. How do you react when someone disagrees with you? You get 3 choices to my question. You take it personally, feel bad. Second one is, you find it interesting, challenging. And the third is, you don't care. Okay, how many people would take it personally? Oh, no one here? So what, now you're all, does that sound like the one that only someone weak would admit to? Okay, how many of you would find that interesting and challenging if someone disagreed with you? Okay, and how many of you don't care? Oh, none of you. Okay, okay, I want to tell you what the research said about you. The first group, the ones, apparently none are here, would be good salespeople, all right? You feel bad, you're motivated, you want to help get to agreement. That second group, the group that said, I find that interesting, challenging, that group are wonderful teachers. And the one gentleman in the front, the only one who said he didn't care, is a great lawyer, all right? So I don't know. Now, it's real research, you can't make this stuff up. All right, so this idea, as I said, let me kind of round that out then. Information, the basis. I mean, you're going to have to do everything else good, but it won't be sufficient. It will be the basis of that competitive advantage, and internalize that in everything you do. Second point I wanted to make is cloud. You're thinking, cloud. I want to convince you, done right, this is about your business model. And you can be agile and have security at the same time, done right. Now, how many of you know the word cloud? Okay, almost everybody in the first half. How many of you are quite confident on the value for retail? Okay, this side more than that side. I don't know the difference of you two, but all right. Now, for those that didn't raise their hand on no, because it's not a big number, perspective on, for the enterprise, if I might, and again, sort of the cliff notes of cloud. My definition of a cloud, it is a business capability delivered as a service. Now, why do I tell you this? Because in the end, these are not technology decisions. I want to convince you this is about your business model. Second point, you hear the words public, you hear the words private. Here's all you need to know. Clouds, by their nature, are something you share. If it's public, you share with neighbors you don't know who they are. If it's private, it's your family. You know who it is. And why is there so much excitement around the word cloud? Well, anything we do in life, if we share it, it's going to be more effective, cost effective. If it's standard, well, makes sense. It should be faster, and I should be more agile. And if it's a service, more people can get to it. So, to me, it makes perfect sense why your industry has a lot of interest in something called cloud. One of our studies was that the average retail chain has 450 specialized applications that only run very infrequently, but have to run. It's highly inefficient. So, here are, and I would tell you, technical choices. If you think they're technical, you're wrong. They're about the business and the business you're building. And at the heart of the choices you make will be the decisions you make around security and privacy and your own speed and agility. So, I will quickly just give you 3 sort of questions to check yourself on what it is you're building here, because they will be all about, as I said, speed and agility, security, privacy. First one is, just go ahead and ask so you know what kind of cloud is your company building. I'm going to assert to you the answer will have to be hybrid. And all that means is you will build your own. Remember I said private? No problem. You will use others, the people have built for you, us and others. People sometimes call that a system of engagement. But be thinking now, I guarantee you, you will have to connect them. Those of you like me that were around in the early .com, when the web first came out, what did you all do? You put catalogs up, you put things for people to look at. But what soon happened? You wanted to do business, you wanted to transact, you wanted to compare to your inventories, you wanted to go into your supply chain. You had to connect those 2 things together. And analysts predict 50% of you in the next 2 years will actually have hybrid clouds. You'll live in both worlds. Now, why do I ask you that? So first, understand that you're giving yourself that flexibility to extend your business. The second, second question you should ask, how am I managing data? Look, the placement of data and you knowing where your data is and what it's doing will end up being the most critical design point most retailers will ever make. Regulatory reasons. 100 countries in the world already have regulation on data protection. European Union, already keeping data within national borders. Cost. It's going to be impossible for you to move that much information through all of these different lines. Insecurity. I just saw a study over the weekend. 2020, enterprise and governments, they predict 75% will fail to protect the data in their cloud. So you have to know where it is. And the third question to ask yourselves and your teams, can I audit it and can I manage it as if it were my own? Otherwise, you don't have to do anything more than read a newspaper, digitally look at one to know it. So, great promise, clouds, agility, cost, access. In fact, and this is the benefit. Just do it against enterprise standards because you're extending your investments and you're extending your brand. This is a world I think we all understand well. So far, I hope I convinced you on number 1, information, basis of competitive advantage. Cloud is going to all be about your business model, and let me have fun with this third one. And it's not far away. We are at the break of a new era of computing. You saw some of this we announced last week, but it is something called cognitive. But let me just describe technology from the beginning of time till now very simply. Everything to date has been one of 2 eras. The first era of technology were things and systems, machines, they counted things. The second era, everything you know of to this date, it's something that's programmable. If this, do that. They just do them faster, slower, all at the same time, everything. This era that you're about, and I believe it'll have a huge impact on your industry, is the cognitive era. You're going to start to see services and systems that learn. And when I say learn, you don't program them. And it's going to come just in time because you've heard all about this conference, me included, about big data, 2.5 billion gigabytes, unstructured. You're going to be very frustrated with all that before it gets better. You're going to have to find just in time a way to deal with it. And that's what this era would do. Instead of you programming, these systems are taught, not programmed. They learn by experience, they learn by interaction, they get smarter and better with time. It is not a search engine. It finds a needle in a haystack, it knows what the haystack is. And you'll interact in natural language, it'll know the implication of your question, it'll ask you a question back. In fact, our next view on this is something called a debater. So last week we announced a whole division on this, but I'm only going to use this to be illustrative. It is an era. An era is never owned by one company. This is a system that, to understand cognitive, I think you have to experience it. So I'd like to show you what's possible in retail. Right now, what's possible in retail. This is a new era of man-machine collaboration. You are going to build new relationships with your customers here. This is from a company named Fluid. They are building what I'm about to show you for North Face. Some of you know North Face, been in a North Face store, great customer experience. Think, every one of you that have people in your stores, if you could bring the best behavior, the best insight of any store associate and put that online, what good would it do? So this is real. This is their website here. I'm going to try to drive you through this. I will remind you, those of you that you probably know this, 70% of online shopping carts are abandoned. Let me just remind you of this. This is a demo of something called an expert personal shopper. And this is a very elementary use of Watson, by the way, but you'll get, no pun intended, but you'll get the sort of the feel of this. So best in-store associate. I walk in, just like I would to someone selling, and I'm going to say, I am planning a trip. I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to gear up for a 14-day backpacking trip. What equipment do I need? So just as I would speak or type, there it goes. Notice what it came up with. Now behind the scenes, had to understand my language, colloquial, gearing up, millions of pages. What did that mean? Shows me and presents to me what might be the possibilities. Now, I know I need a technical pack. I say what technical packs are going to be needed to go to Fitzroy in Patagonia. All right, what's happening now? It's going to have to figure out, know where Fitzroy is, know winter, know the temperature, the mountain, the summit. I get a whole collection. You saw one up in the corner there. I'm kind of interested in this, and I notice it speaks about ABS technology. I ask, can you tell me what ABS technology is for this one technical pack? Now, out of curiosity, I told you this is not a search engine. This weekend, I went ahead and I just searched to see what does come up when you say ABS. And I want you to know I got 740 million entries on anti-lock braking systems, only to be followed by abs of steel, all right? None of them came up with what he came up with, the avalanche airbag system, which in context is what I'm talking about. I get videos, other kinds of gear, but the moment of truth for all of us. What do we all do at this point? We jump out and we want to go check, how's it rated? We are going to leave that site, and as you know, 60% of your customers never come back. I type in, how's it rated? It's gone out, it's read tens of thousands of different ratings from all different places, put them together, including North Face's, put it here, I'm impressed, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add this, I say I like it, let's add it to my bag. And sure enough, as I go to checkout, it's going to remind me about a cold weather sleeping bag. Very elementary, but I hope it was just a great picture of, do you see how easy I interacted? No menus, no buttons, no this, no that, everything in context. But what you do is you build trust that way. You build trust. And so just imagine this world where it's this interaction, whether it's with your merchandiser, your buyer, your designers. This is not just a new era of technology. This will be a new era of commerce. So with that, let me end on just a word I thought I might make on our responsibilities, yours and mine in this era. Because it's a really exciting time. Your industry, my industry, I think it is historic. But there are serious policy concerns. They're around security, they're around privacy. And in fact, they're there for some good reasons. And no matter how complex your supply chain gets, you'll never be able to outsource things like trust. And as I always say to people, there's always this balance, right? You're going to think about security and freedom, privacy, convenience. And people make trade-offs on those every day. So what you do and what we do together, we will do by design. Because what's at stake is your most precious asset. It is your brand. There's a study that says there's $1 trillion of retail revenue at stake if there's trust in how we protect personal information. So let me leave you with 3 words. There are 3 principles that I think are good to check on. I do it for my own company, your company, to have a position about these that help. One is transparency. A skeptical public, they will establish affinity with companies who are authentic and transparent, meaning Tell people what data you collect. Second word, control. Individuals must be able to control their own data, opt out. And with all these new things you're doing to engage people, you're going to have to give them control. And the third word is trust. And trust is always about going beyond compliance. Trust comes through behavior, as it always does. And in this case, I think as long as you give people more value, in return, you get trust. And there are this new compact forms between you and a customer. So, hopefully you can tell from my sort of excitement on all of this, I am excited about a new era of value for your industry at the intersection of our two industries. I thank you for your time. Many of you I know are IBM customers, and I must thank you very much for the trust you place in IBM as well while I'm here. So let me thank you, and let me bring Terry back to the stage for my friend and I to have a little bit of fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Ginni, and I hope you all, like I, got a little window into what we can all expect, and that is the merging of technology and retail into a very natural state as time goes on. It's there, but it's happening more. So let's stay on where you were ending, and that is talking about the North Face example here, and just trying to move to a different level of having technology help us all make better decisions as retailers and as consumers. So tell me about what you and what you see, and what's the vision for us next, where today the average retailer in this room can benefit from some of this technology that's available. We're all using mobile devices now to find where we're going to shop, and then from there, there's various examples of how we're using technology. What do you see as some of the simple things that every retailer in this room can benefit from, just from the technology that's offered by IBM?
I think this is, and Terry will remember back a couple years ago when we had started focusing on the chief marketing officer, and this goes back years now already, and saying, look, some of the basics in the whole world expects one-to-one marketing. I mean, you work on that very much with your mom strategy, as an example. And so one-to-one marketing has got to be there. The second thing you've got to do is build this idea of a systems of engagement. I mean, maybe that's a word that says it's one thing to talk to a customer, but to get a two-way going, an engagement, so to speak, I think that one-to-one, truly one-to-one, and that doesn't mean a small segment. That means I know you, Terry, and then this idea that I get a two-way going. I don't care what size you are, you can do that, right? I mean, because Terry, on this idea of big data, actually I don't even think it matters what industry you are. There are three big things that'll change. I think you will look in your own company to drive productivity. You will use analytics in everything you do to drive productivity. Whether that is your warehouse, whether it's your hiring, like I tried to show you, no matter what it is, you will then go and you will try to add information. If you build a product or a service, you'll add it to it. I saw a great stat. 70% of all manufacturers are adding some sort of data service to their product. 70%, right?
Yeah.
And then the third thing is you'll do this one-to-one. So I think it's true for everyone.
I totally agree with you. I do think we've gone from, in our own case, trying to focus on localization at a store level, but ultimately it's really about the individuals within that store that really matters, that one.
And that's a big leap, right?
That's
I mean, people
leap.
think, a small segment, or I have 100 different segments. That is way different than individual, right?
Yeah, no question. By the way, I've got some questions I'm going to ask. If you have questions, go onto the screen and you'll be able to see how you can connect with us, and then those questions will pop up here. They're going to put this up on the screen about how you can tweet and find a way to get your questions on the screen here, and then I'll read those off as time goes on. Okay, so you spoke about cloud technology, and you're trying to break it down for this audience.
I promised to do the Cliff Notes. Was that?
Yeah, I thought so.
Okay,
I thought it was.
Okay.
But I think stay on it a little bit, and again, talk about the average retailer in this room and how we can benefit. Because you and I have had extensive conversations about cloud and what that's going to mean for the future, and how information is going to be stored in the future, and how it's going to be more portable. But tell us how the retailers in this room can benefit from cloud technology today.
Look, I would not be surprised, every one of you. I mean, many of you you may be born on the cloud. That's one group, right? And then there are many who were not born. They existed before. And one of the first things you do when I say some of the very first kinds of applications I see people go do up in the cloud, and I look at us, we've got a portfolio of about 100 software as a service applications. And they are typically what you would call all in the commerce area. Many of them are in merchandising, they're in selling, they're in marketing, they're in promotions. And this gives you, I think, that's what they sometimes call these systems of engagement. There are the front office facing applications. You will put new ones up there. You'll do them fast, they'll be iterative, and I think that's a very good way to get started. However, like I said, I believe it will, you'll still say, ooh, you know what? I could get a big competitive advantage if I connect that with the things I already know. And
right.
I mean, you have a tremendous history, you have inventory, you have price, you have a huge amount you know about in your back. Indeed. And so when you connect these two together, but I think everybody in this room will start there and then end up thinking about how they get their competitive advantage by connecting those things together.
Here's a question from our audience, and the question is big data for big retailers, or is it really for everybody in this room?
This to me is I want to give you, anyone who's not huge, I want to give you great confidence here.
That's 90% of this
yeah,
audience.
Well, that's true. I agree with you. I mean, perfect, because this idea, and I thought long and hard about us using these words, a natural resource, that data would be a natural resource. Think about natural resources. Everybody can have access to them. It doesn't mean you turn them into something, right? They're raw materials. You will see big countries, little countries when you think of real natural resources. Big ones that waste them, little ones that capitalize on them. To me, the value of this information is only going to flow to those who actually refine it. And that is not a statement of size. In fact, I will contend that, if I may say smaller, I hate to make that distinction, it's going to be easier, because it is a cultural statement to sort of move and to make decisions a different way. As they say, to go from, sort of gut check, fat check.
Right.
And so I would contend the more nimble are going to have an easier time. It's going to be a culture of analytics in everything that you do, and it may actually be much easier.
Okay, now let me talk again about cloud, about big data. There's been a great deal of concern during the holiday season in particular. It got to a higher voice level on the subject of data breach. And so there's a great deal of concern on the part of retailers. Now with all these things we're talking about, isn't there even more risk that we can be targets of our customers' information being breached?
Look, I think that this is why, Tara, when I ended, and you and I have talked about this, I think that these are really important. These aren't technology decisions, these are policy decisions that you're going to make. And there's certain amounts of information, you don't have to have it identified personally with people, that you can get a lot of value out without it being identified to an exact person. So you're going to make some choices about what you do with information, and then you're going to make choices about how you protect it. And so these are why I say, cloud will be the next area that you're going to have to, that's why ask the question about it and how it's protected, and and how you can audit, you can manage, because that will be it, and you are the custodian of these things. So I believe you absolutely can do this securely. There are just take certain information, you break it into the ways it's handled, and then you make certain policy decisions, and then of course you implement different systems to do it. But I would give you another tip about security. I mean, my point on security is it too will be a big data problem. As we all know, none of these problems happen like that. That's old-fashioned. Those kind of security issues, those are old-fashioned. This is now about you getting good at analytics that, as I say, predict footprints in the sand. Because nothing happens immediately. Information doesn't go in 1 second. It'll always be things that are calculated, planned over a long period of time. And so this too becomes a big data problem. So I think it is an important problem. It's probably the most important issue on all of our minds. And that's why I think you take very seriously policy decision, tool decision, how you break the data into different pieces, and the guidelines for your own employees and what it is that happens. And that'd be a whole nother discussion, but in and of itself, there's a roadmap, I think, about what you do with your own people.
Right, indeed. So you and I have talked a lot about the millennial customer. In fact, Ginni and I first met, we had a...
When we were millennials.
Yeah,
no.
It seemed like it. We were getting to know one another with the transition, and so at the end of the dinner, she said, what is it that IBM should be doing to help Macy's and Bloomingdale's in the future. And I said, you need to figure out how to help us understand the millennial consumer. And at that time, it was, the 13 to 33-year-old. They're aging like I am. But we talked about that, and since then we've had some good conversations about how technology can help us connect with this customer. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think there's 2 points here. It's a very interesting thing. How many of you think about millennials as a category at all? Anybody? Okay.
Yeah,
okay. Quite a few actually. So Terry and I had done this work on it, but I think there are just some basic tenets, because remember, I do believe the real answer is 1-to-1, all right? But there are some, I think, basic characteristics we would both agree with on this, on millennials. One is, whose opinion they value the most, as you all know, is not yours. They value each other's opinion. So you have to both play in that and take advantage of it. The next thing is that while they also will give you information, but for value in return. So you must be very conscious of that equation, of that give and get of value. And the third, and I think we both see this in our own workforces, is they work different too. I mean, I can say the kind of they, I'm not I'm not a millennial, not that that's not obvious, but I mean,
Really?
To that point, they work differently, right? And so I've got lots and hundreds of thousands in my own company, right? So the way they work and the way that they'll communicate. So I think for both of us, we found some very interesting behaviors as we've gone through this work, and that you've got to be cognizant of. And I think the most interesting thing is how they work.
Yeah, I think one of the best pieces of the learnings we found was not from the data that we had, but putting
our teams together, our millennial
10 of your
teams.
millennials together with 10 of my millennials, putting them in a room with no adult supervision,
Yep.
and letting them come back to us and say how they choose to shop in the future and what they would look for, in a retailer.
Yeah, no, they had some great ideas,
very,
right?
Very good ideas, yeah.
I see one of these questions here, which is worth, do you mind if I,
No, go, let's go. Yeah.
It's this thing that says, is there a new job around town when you talk about big data? I tell you, that is a very good question, meaning, because is it the CMO, is it the CIO, is it the CFO, is it the, what is it and whose job? And I do see something a number of customers and clients starting to do. We'll see if that's really needed in the long term, but chief data officers, there may be a better name for now. I mean, a CDO doesn't sound very good, but a chief, some sort of chief information, not as you think of in IT, but that saying, hey, this is a most important asset I have. Do I need for some period of time an actual role? And the banks were the first to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, here's another one. So the big data is indeed relatively in its infancy stages, but some of the early learnings, this is from the audience, some of the early learnings of big data that you can reveal to us. Something about consumer behavior or something about what you've learned.
Yeah, I think one of, there are many, but I think one of the biggest ones that I think everybody has to internalize, something I said during our talk, is in exchange for information, there has to be value. And this is going to be the basis. In fact, we did some studies that we were timing how much time would people spend to give you information, and it sort of timed out at about 15 minutes, I think. Mm-hmm. And at that point, they want something in return for it. And so I think this idea that this is, they're in control, you give value, and this is a two-way, I think is probably the most important takeaway of all of this. My second one, though, and Terry and I will get off this point on information, this idea of, when I say basis of competitive advantage, I always say to people, that means competition's going to be on the edges on who does this better, who was more real time, who had the pricing more, down to the exact person, and that's what you're going to compete on, right? And that is what is going to make the difference. And that's why, to me, this isn't like a leapfrog you take. You work towards this, and you get better, and you get better at it.
So you and I have talked about mobile with another friend of ours who's in that business, and talked about the change. Where's mobile going? And what we're starting to see is video is becoming a very, very big usage of mobile devices. How does that impact the customer in the future? And what comments would you have about that subject?
Yeah, I think and for those of so in addition to not only what I provide, obviously we provide to many of you, but I run a big company too. And this idea of mobile, we've clearly entered a world that's mobile first. So even in my own CIO office, I have a CIO, obviously, I have my own big IT department, I have all of this for my whole workforce, for my customers, et cetera. Their position is mobile first. Every time new function comes out, it's mobile first, right? And so I think easy to say, hard to do all the time. And in fact, that is one of the things, because it's information, it's connection to your back, all the sorts of things that happen around that. So with mobile, I think we will be a mobile first world, right? We will be, there's nothing I have to tell you to convince you of that at all. Now, video, all of this is going to play a role. It won't be just video, it's going to be multidimensional around this that will change the way you interact and engage. And I actually believe many of you, you'll start looking at your own investments in technology. You may separate them between systems of engagement, sort of the back office systems of record, just to really advance that agenda.
Yep. So that brings up the question, so where does all this report in the future? Does it report to the head chief technology officer? We have a chief omnichannel officer in my own company who supervises technology and supervises logistics. But some could say it could go to the CFO. You could make lots of arguments.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about that, or do you think it has to have its own separate title, as you were alluding to earlier?
I think it depends. Isn't that a great answer?
That's the right answer.
But it is the right answer, actually. So don't let me not. And it really depends on your company, because I can see people with all different models, and I understand why for that moment in time. And so, as I said, if you're really trying to aggressively move your investment into everything that engage with a customer, I can see actually separating this and having one side, another side, kind of all of my back office systems. That's be one way to run. I can also see if I am a bank, I'm going to create someone who's going to be the policy person over this whole thing. But I know for sure, I actually wouldn't delegate it underneath any. Terry's heard me say this. I say this to many clients. I say, a number of these points, whatever time you spend on them, you don't spend enough. The point of security, the point of whatever, you've got to spend more time on this, because these are evolving landscapes all the time.
Right, and as I'm listening to you, in our own case, we have an infrastructure that requires its own management team and organization and focus. But when we want things done really quickly, that's a different. That's my whole mobile platform game.
That's right.
Whether it be my online business or my social marketing team, they need things that are done faster and without that same big security blanket of the
and then eventually those two, they're going to connect, like I said, exactly. And so you think ahead how you build a highway so they don't do this,
right?
And they come together. Because this is a great time, I think, because at the heart of it, when I say our intersection of these two industries, you've got a world where I do believe information is a natural resource. And I believe if you keep thinking about it strategically, it'll be how you'll win, and you'll win. It'll determine the winners and the losers, right? And what cloud will do for you is agility, speed. And that's what you just sort of described and how you thought about that.
Okay, so I'm going to change gears. So we didn't really talk about that. You didn't really talk a lot about, you mentioned Watson, but this is something absolutely fascinating, and we.
I'm going to sound like a proud mother in a second.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
So
you deserve to be, because the Jeopardy experiment was fascinating and interesting, but you figured out now how to turn this into something even more productive than winning game shows.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that and some of the medical advice that Watson's doing, but also what you see in the future as a potential of maximizing.
So look,
Watson.
and again, I'm cognizant, not as a commercial, because it is the beginning of an era. So you will see, there will be many more in time to come here of things that you don't program. But what we did, and I understand people, we showed Jeopardy here 2 years ago or so, right? People had some fun up here. But, right or wrong, we made the decision to go do the hardest thing we could after that, and we have been working on oncology. We have worked with the best centers, cancer centers in the world, Memorial Sloan Kettering, the Cancer Center here, Cleveland Clinic, MD Anderson. And what we've been working on is diagnosis and treatment. But what it does is, because look, no matter any of you, everybody's had experience in the medical system. It takes, any published information takes 7 to 15 years to get into wide medical practice. And anybody who's had to take care of a loved one or whatever it is, if you know anything about oncology, first diagnosis matters for everything. And so what we have trained Watson to do, it's already ingested almost all of the medical information known to man in these areas of oncology. It has been trained by the world's best doctors. And what it's able to do is, with information about you, to determine its confidence in a diagnosis, hit the evidence button, why, and then the treatment. And if it doesn't have enough confidence, the kinds of tests and what you should do next. And so this is about to roll out. Memorial Sloan Kettering will be going into production. I mean, these are real production pilots out with doctors. But it's a wonderful, to me, for retail, it's a clue. And now this is one of the hardest problems in the world, right? But you would wonder, those of you that know doctors or have one in your family, for this to hold the attention of the world's best doctors all this time as they've worked to teach, you had to teach it the medical language and the like. This tells me, I mean, this is something unbelievable. And for that, the interaction, it's almost like it's a person. That's how they interact. It is, and that is how, when I was showing you that little really simple North Face, you're interacting like it's a person.
Right, yeah.
And so this isn't about replacing people, this is about augmenting this. And I think that's what this future is. So we did medicine first, and we'll go through a number of different oncologies, different kind of medical treatments. There are lines up of people around this. But at the same time, we're gonna open it up to travel, retail, financial services. And you got just a tiny glimpse there on what you saw with what's the art of the possible around the retail industry. So to me, this is it is a new era, because remember what it's done is,
because a human being can't absorb the
you cannot.
encyclopedia of what Watson can absorb.
No,
right?
and it never forgets.
And it never forgets.
And then what it actually happens is, it's not a big table lookup. There are thousands of these algorithms running at once, and it forms hypotheses, and it proves them right, wrong, compares them, and over time it gets better. And so this will, I think, with your industry, it'll have some profound abilities to build this relationship of trust when you're in an online world with your own customers, as well as then when you're in a store, how you will interact, because you'll know who I am. And I think the opportunities are endless with this. It's now been, we did a really soft launch, because we're gonna open it up and let people, not ourselves, others, go build applications with it. And I think the numbers I saw this morning were close to 1,000 have already applied to try to, get access. And so we're gonna, roll it out carefully, and we'll go from there.
I think there's a lot of money to be made on that model myself. So I have a great question from the audience here. I love this. The question is, what suggestions do you have to build momentum on emerging technology opportunities with, with an executive team that is focused on yesterday's paradigm?
So Terry, what do you think?
I think it should come work for me.
I agree with
IBM.
you. Come work for one of us, right? This is a really interesting point. You know what? I do have a suggestion on this. I have a couple different suggestions on it. One is, just go do it. I mean, that is part of what this world is, right? Experiment and get it out there. And so when you say, when I have an opportunity with an executive team focused on yesterday, in this world, you can get out there and try things and get them up and get prototypes and get things going, and you can start to see results. And to me, seeing is believing. And so I would just go do it, right? I would, when you say yesterday's paradigm, again, I think that's the see it, believe it is the biggest thing. Or, like Terry says, work for one of us that absolutely embrace this.
I do think, I think not, the yesterday's, paradigm comment, I think means probably that they just don't understand it. They don't understand with this technology how it's going to benefit the company, benefit
That's why
them.
I think if you see it and show it.
Yeah, so I think your point is right. If you can just demonstrate how it does work and even do some testing.
Proof of concepts.
Yeah,
or whatever
proof of concept
you might
without
call
a great expense, attachment to that. High reward potential with low risk. I think those are the ways that you get.
Because that's the great thing about this world. You can do that at very low barrier to entry. Do these proof of concepts, and that's what I always say. Forget about, just proof it, show it, and I think that's the world you're in.
Another question from the audience is how do you define customer value?
It's a magical concept.
The magical concept, customer value. How do you define it?
Yeah, this is a very good point, because I must tell you, a little bit of IBM is over 100 years old, and when you say every great company has a purpose, and ours is to be essential. Now, Terry and I have talked about these things. But like any great purpose, you can't call yourself that. Only your customers can determine if that is what you are. And this idea of customer value, I believe in many ways is that same way, that your customers will decide. And in fact, I think customer value varies by individual here. Now, you may say that's too hard for me to handle, but that is the world you're going to be in. And they will tell you what they value, and then you respect it. So when I think a customer value is being meaningful in how you serve your customers, while you may do it in segments at first, it will be based on what the individual varies, right? So, and I think, again, you do that very well, Terry, as you've tried to personalize those interactions into what they value, right? So I think it's a mistake to give it one definition.
Yeah, and I also think in our own business relationship, in that we try things together, not just you and I, but our teams try things together without knowing there's going to be a monetary reward in the end, but that if we can help solve each other's problems, and it may not work financially for us together, but it may lead to a strengthening of our trust and relationship, which will indeed lead to a bigger relationship financially. Okay, let me go. So the Chief Marketing Officer's role with all of this change, and I know in my own case, and my Chief Marketing Officer, Martine Reardon's here, that role is changing rather dramatically from what it was just 5 years ago, which is such a print-driven management to business, to today, this direct interaction with individual consumers, and technology is what's driving all of that. Just comments.
So this is, and mine is here as well, John Iwata. We both have two great chief marketing officers. And if you think back in time, what did all of our chief marketing officers, many of you may be in the audience, do? They originally would have probably first and foremost thought of stewarding your brand, maybe, would be one of the things. Marketing, conventional marketing, advertising, as you would say, and the like. And then I flip forward to today, and I really hold them accountable for this idea of one-to-one, how to do both digital, one-to-one, how to reach a customer, and how to form this dialogue of engagement with them. And I have to say, I would put a third in there, how to make and be sure that you are authentic to your brand. Because I think in this day and age, I always say it's kind of like an X-ray up against your body. Your customers can see how everything operates inside.
Yeah.
And therefore, the words and the music have to match, as they say. And it will be clear if you try to act one way and they know you're a different way. And so this authenticity to your brand, I think, is truly important, right? So that's why transparency, authenticity in this world. And by the way, you were talking about the millennials. That is one of the things they value. They value, and they sense it immediately, is this authenticity to what it is each of us do.
We've got time for one more question, and the question is, you talked about data being a competitive advantage. So what can we learn from IBM with your experiences with other industries that might apply to retailers?
Yeah, I think this idea that can you take, and I mentioned manufacturers a second ago. Now they're just getting there, and this idea that 70% of them are saying, how can I take anything I have as a product and turn it into a service? I think that paradigm applies here. Anything that you might have, you offer as a product, how do you make it a service? I mean, you offer credit cards, you offer all different sorts of things. How would you turn that into a service? You offer me to buy a product, a thing. What would you do with all that information to turn that more into a service? I think that is at core a paradigm that happens with information. Things move, and they get smarter, and they move to becoming an annuity, a service, versus a single point in time. I could think of lots of different ways that and you would love nothing more than to have an annuity relationship with me as a customer than a single buy it one at a time, right?
Sure.
Perfect. So I think that is, if you watch manufacturing, that is one. The other, I would say, some of the other industries, you see the convergence of industries, and that's true with your industry as well, right? You'll be able to do things, pull them together that take you to have partners that come from other industries out there, not just your own, working with your own information. That would be the next thing that's out there. So Terry, thank you.
Thank you, Ginni.
It has been a great pleasure. I've loved being here. I appreciate it very much.
I'm sure the audience did as well. So thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks.